Hello and welcome to Small Caps. I'm Peter Capsanis. Well, aspiring miner and downstream producer International Graphite, that's ASX code IG6, has shared some positive news this week in relation to its Springdale project in Hopetoun on the south coast of Western Australia. Graphite is a key component for batteries, and the prospective mine could be a major player for the company's battery processing hub in Collie in the state's southwest. There's a lot to unpack, so we'll get straight into it. Joining me now is International Graphite's CEO and Managing Director, Andrew Worland. Andrew, thanks for your company.
Pleasure, Peter. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Look, as I mentioned, there is quite a bit to get through, so we will dive head in first. But first of all, tell us a bit about the company's history. Graphite is rare in Australia, and a mine-to-market operation is even rarer. So, what's the vision for the company, Andrew?
Peter, the company was really created out of the vision of a couple of the founders who are process engineers and metallurgists by background, and they've spent a good part of their careers. I'm talking about Phil Hurst, our chairman, and David Pass, our technical director. They've spent the best part of their careers working in many graphite development stage entities, putting together feasibility studies, going through the resource evaluation, the metallurgical test work programs, and putting together a set of feasibility studies for various concentrate operations all around the world, with particular emphasis in Australia and Africa for ASX and AIM listed companies. During the course of, I guess, those professional experiences, they identified the need to deal with the fines components of those particular projects. Most of those projects had a coarse and fine graphite supply from them, given the mineralogies of the deposits. And the fines market during that period of time didn't really have an established market other than some traditional industrial uses. The emerging market at the time was the electric vehicle market. So we're talking going back to sort of 2015, 16, 17, 18 in that period. It's been the enormous growth in the lithium-ion battery and the electric vehicle market that's created essentially a new market for graphite fines. And they saw that coming through all of their work, and they started working on downstream processing facilities and developed a suite of, if you like, process IP around downstream facilities. So when it came to sort of 2019, 2020, when we created International Graphite, what we were looking for was a project that could match the downstream capabilities that they were putting together. And the Springdale project on the south coast of Western Australia was presented to us. And at the time, the value that, if you like, equity markets were ascribing to graphite projects was not really in the graphite mining operations, it was in the downstream. But we saw the real opportunity of bolting together a downstream processing facility with a mine in Western Australia, and that being a unique strategic advantage for us that only a handful of other companies around the world were trying to do at the time. And so that's the sort of the history of the company and the strategy as to why we've gotten to the suite of assets that we've got. And now we're, I guess, poised to take that next step into the detailed feasibility world, having released the scoping study this week.
Yeah, and we'll get into it very shortly. I mentioned that graphite is a key component for batteries. So how crucial is the resource and how accessible is it in world markets? Because, as you say, lithium's taken hogged all the glory, hasn't it? But graphite's kind of growing in ascendancy now.
Absolutely. So I guess the fundamental difference between lithium and graphite has been that the graphite historically has been abundant in China, and at the moment, every ton of graphite that makes its way into a battery anode must go through China for processing. And so what if you like, the gigafactories of Europe and North America are looking to do is circumvent the China stranglehold on graphite. And lithium, of course, isn't quite as predominant in terms of mining activity in China as it is in other parts of the world. So you've seen a lot more corporate activity and buzz around lithium than you have in the graphite space. But I think we all think that that's actually set to change over the next 2 or 3 years as the inflection point for supply demand arrives, and more pressure comes to bear on for North America and Europe in particular of diversifying their supply away from that China supply chain. So our deposit is, graphite is clearly there's a lot of graphite around the world. Our graphite is, we think, reasonably unique. It's got an amazing location in Hopetoun. So many of the graphite assets around the world are what you might call stranded. They require significant infrastructure networks. They're new facilities on site to build essentially a whole town or operation around those particular projects, whereas we're very fortunate at being just south of Ravensthorpe.
Yep.
Obviously, First Quantum Nickel are there, huge accommodation camps, huge mining operations in themselves, and Mount Catherine Lithium, and an established region for mining. So we've got a lot of unique advantages with our location that I think presents us very well and very favourably compared to our peers.
Yeah, all right. So yeah, you're definitely not a stranger. Well, I guess mining activity is no stranger, rather, to that part of the world. As you mentioned, Ravensthorpe, Hopetoun, obviously going back 20 years ago, BHP were set to launch their nickel mine in Ravensthorpe, and obviously that didn't happen. But there's been, I guess, some good synergies ever since. So then the focus is on leveraging your local assets, and Springdale, for example, which was named, for those who may not know, Australian Resource Discovery of the Year in 2023. So definitely quite a prestigious honour. So you've just released your mining scoping study. What's the latest on the project?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that award, Peter, because really the scoping study was predicated off that amazing resource announcement we made back in September of last year. So when we inherited and acquired the Springdale project, which was essentially the foundation for our listing back in April of 2022, the resource at the time was 15.6 million tonnes, just over 6% TGC, for slightly less than 1 million tonnes of contained graphite. Now we've taken that now to 49.3 million tonnes at a slightly elevated graphitic content for about 3.2 million tonnes of contained metal. So nearly 3.5 times expansion in the resource at Springdale from the drilling program we did in 2022 and 2023. And within that, there's a high-grade component to it, which has served very well for the purpose of the scoping study when it came to scheduling our mining operations. So that discovery was the underpins, it's the backbone of our scoping study and our financial and economic forecast for Springdale. The goal of the Springdale scoping study was to really come up with a set of operating costs and capital cost structures and a mine plan that would feed concentrate to our planned Collie battery anode facilities. So back in April of last year, we released a scoping study on what a spheritizing, purification and coating facility in Collie would look like, put out a set of operating capital cost estimates for that. But what we needed to do then was integrate that facility with the mining operation at Springdale. And for the last 6 to 9 months has been the focus of our technical team's been completion of that Springdale scoping study. The goal was to mine 500,000 tonnes of ore, grading around about 10% total graphitic content for an average concentrate supply to Collie of 40,000 tonnes of concentrate, grading 95%. And the guys have done a magnificent job in pulling apart the mineral resource estimate and scheduling it. But they've actually come up with a mine schedule that treats ore for 37 years. From a JORC and ASX compliance perspective, we could only disclose publicly the economic and financial implications of the first 15 years, where the indicated component of the resource dominates that mine schedule. But we're very comfortable with the fact that we've established a significantly long life mining operation through the mine scheduling process. The other important piece, or two important pieces, if you like, on the cost structure for Springdale is that we think we'll be in the certainly the bottom third, but maybe the bottom quartile of operating costs for a concentrate operation. There's been next to no finessing of our mining schedule at this point in time. So we have published a operating cost of $485 per tonne of concentrate delivered to Collie for downstream processing. Now, I'm sure we'll be able to drive that down to $400 to $450 per tonne, which would certainly put us in the bottom quartile cost producers globally of graphite producers. So we think we've come up with a really, really solid and robust operating cost structure for Springdale. The capital cost estimate itself is also very competitive. It's just under $76 million with a 25% contingency, and includes $9.5 million worth of pre-strip that we've capitalised into the capital cost estimate. And that, for a 500,000 tonne per annum plant, gets a huge benefit from the fact that we don't need to recreate infrastructure for this project, because we are essentially stepping into an infrastructure-rich environment down in Hopetoun and Ravensthorpe. And that comes back to our previous points around many peer assets, if you like, are somewhat stranded and require a significant amount of infrastructure to bring those projects to bear. We're very fortunate that we don't quite have those pressures, given our location. The other factor that sets us apart from our peers is the mother nature of the deposit. It is a fines deposit. There are no coarse flakes within the deposit, so that enables us to create a very simple process flow sheet that just deals with one single product of graphite, where some of our peers will have multiple products and multiple cleaning stages, multiple logistic stages and so forth at the back end of their plants to accommodate different size fractures, if you like, and fines quality for their concentrate. So we've got a number of unique advantages that we're blessed with by Mother Nature that stand us in good stead relative to our peers. And so that study was used to update the economic and financial forecasts of our Collie BAM facility, and that gave us the IRRs and the NPVs that we're able to publish in what we've referred to as the integrated scoping study.
Yeah, okay, all right. Well, look, a couple of points I want to just sort of hone in on the back of what you've just said, because there is a bit to process. So first of all, you've said you went from an initial forecast of 15-year mine life to 37 years, I think is what you said.
What I said was that we were only able to publish in terms of our ASX disclosures, the economic implications of the first 15 years.
Yes.
And that's because that period of time was dominated by indicated mineral resource in terms of where the processed material was being generated from within the actual resource itself. When you factor in a heap of our inferred material that we believe will be mineable, that will certainly take us out well and truly into sort of the 37 years of operations. But that just doesn't have the same level of confidence that allows us to make economic and financial disclosures to the market.
Okay, all right. So what's the mine activity timeline then on the back of this scoping study? I know there's other things to happen before you start digging per se. So is there a timeline you've got in mind?
Yeah, so it's a pretty simple operation in terms of what other mining operations might look like in sort of base metals or gold, for example. We've got a shallow deposit. The first 10 or 15 years of the operation will be sort of down to that 50 to 75 metre mark. Be multiple pits that we'll be mining from. We're on cleared agricultural land. We've got abundant water on site. Very simple, very small power draw. So tying all the permitting and the final technical feasibility work together ought to be able to be done this calendar year. So we should be in a position, all things being equal, by the end of the calendar year to have a feasibility study completed, and with a bit of luck, permitting completed too, to allow us to make an investment decision on the mine. Of course, that investment decision will be dependent upon the status of our downstream work and the sort of products we're going to bring to market through the downstream development in Collie. And of course, as I'm sure all of your listeners would know, there's a varying level of qualification processes required around different sorts of intermediate and downstream products. And so part of the next 12 months as well will be focused very heavily on test work associated with micronising and spheronising initially, getting customer, if you like, validation of that work, and also extending that to purification and ultimately coating. And the precise timetable for those particular activities and how that dovetails into overall project development is difficult to forecast at this point. But we'll just keep working through those processes, and the piece that we know, the piece of the puzzle we know we can get done by the end of this year is the mine itself.
All right, so it could be not too far away before you have open pit graphite mine on the south coast of WA, is what you're saying.
Well, so rather than say when, in terms of when we would be committing, what we can say is that the construction schedule for it is around about 12 months from investment decision. Nothing unique or exotic about any of the concentrate or crushing equipment that we'll be using. It's pretty much off the shelf equipment that's used globally. So we'll be able to procure that equipment quite easily. The footprint for the mine itself isn't particularly big. So, earthworks will be able to be completed within a month or two to just establish the site itself. So, very confident around that development period once the final investment decision is made. And again, a reasonably simple ramp-up period over that first 6 months to get the plant up to full production. So, within 18 months of a decision to mine, you could expect to see us running the plant pretty aggressively at that 500,000 tonne per annum rate.
All right, and how would you ship the ore, the graphite, to Collie for processing? Would it be via road?
Just trucks, roads. There's a huge network of sealed roads all throughout the southwest, as all of your listeners, I'm sure, would be aware. We'll have probably three trucks a day on the road. So relative to the amount of, animal produce and wheat and canola and so forth that's going up and down the roads, it's nothing. I mean, compared to the scale of those industries. So it'll be barely noticed on the roads.
Okay. All right. So what does the integration between Collie and Springdale mean in terms of the company's overall strategy? I mean, in some respects, I mean, it's not overly close, but you're reasonably close. It'd be around about a 6-hour drive for your trucks to go from Hopetoun to Collie, give or take. So obviously you're close by the processing facility. In terms of in terms of the overall strategy, I mean, is that something that's obviously a good cost factor, a positive cost factor?
Well, remember, every tonne of concentrate at the moment that's produced around the world has to go through China for processing. So if you're producing a tonne of graphite in Africa, you're hauling it to the port, and then you're putting it on a ship as a concentrate form and then transferring it thousands of kilometres across the Indian Ocean up into China.
Yes.
And then, so in comparison, that thousands of kilometres journey for those producers is equivalent to our 450 kilometres between Springdale and Collie. So we have a much shorter logistics network in terms of getting it into the battery anode material. Of course, that battery anode material then has to go to North America and Europe, but it'll go in as a, if you like, a final product form rather than an intermediate product form. So
do you see you see your processing hub being a conduit for other graphite from other parts of the world?
I think so. Yeah, I think these downstream facilities don't really care where the product comes from. Remember, product comes in at 95% graphite concentrate. Generally speaking, there are some lower grade cons around the world, but generally speaking, you're looking to produce a concentrate if you're a miner at 95% graphite content. In which case, you're really you're trying to upgrade that to 99.95, 97 for battery grade material. So you're not really dealing with any significant impurities that are going to vary between mine to mine. So over a course of many years, there isn't any reason why a particular facility couldn't absorb other mining operations material. And of course, that's what happens in China. You have far more mines than you do processing facilities. So that's certainly we think a viable option. The downstream facilities will outlive any mining operation. So they're industrial plants. They could be around for 100 years. So they'll outlive the life of Springdale probably.
Okay, so in terms of the future, and obviously, it's this sort of goes beyond, I guess, for the benefit of IG6, but in terms of a community benefit, Collie, for those who don't know, was the mecca of coal mining and electricity generation in Western Australia for decades, and obviously those baseload power stations are being scaled back quite dramatically. Now, how critical is it that that town is being developed into a new energy hub there?
Look, all downstream processing facilities are trying to capture the cheapest energy form they can, because most of them are pretty energy intensive. They're usually taking a concentrate or an intermediate product and trying to upgrade it by essentially removing impurities and deleterious items. And so that generally means lots of power, grinding and liberation. So you always try, and that's why you see a lot of downstream facilities linked between Collie and Kwinana, if you like, or Rockingham in Western Australia, where you've got ready access to chemicals, you've got ready access to services, ready access to people, and industrial parks. And that's the attraction of that strip, and that's the attraction of Collie. The closer you are to Collie, the lower the transmission cost of power, because everything that replaces those coal mines, wind and solar, is going to be coming through the Collie transmission, what they call the Southwest Interconnected Grid or circuit, and the power will be disseminated out of the Collie hub, where all the existing transmission network exists. So the closer you are to that, the cheaper your power cost is going to be, and so that's part of the reason why we thought Collie was an ideal location for our facilities.
Now, going back a bit, you received some funding from the state and federal government. What's that meant for the business and for the critical minerals industry in Australia?
Well, it's a great endorsement about what we're trying to achieve, that critical supply chain of getting battery materials, if you like, unashamedly, we talk about Western Australia being the best mining jurisdiction in the world. I think if it's not that, it's one or two or three on the list every year. And it's recognised in Europe and North America. You're going to get a stable product, you're going to get a consistent product, you're going to get a government regime that's stable, and the structures in place are very investable. So that's has been very important for us. It's a great endorsement of that supply chain that we're trying to create. It's allowed us to put a bit of development into Collie, which is clearly needing some a transition for new industries to come to town. We've been only too happy to participate in the development of Collie and new industries there. So those programs are really important to battery minerals, because they're not easy to develop. We've just sat through the last 6 months a pretty bleak lithium environment, and so for all the euphoria over lithium for the best part of the last 18 months, the last 3 months in particular has been very difficult, and that's the mining industry. I mean, it's a very cyclical industry, and you have your ups and your downs, and you've got to weather the storm and carry on through those different cycles, and lithium prices will return, and those groups will live to fight another day and thrive again. But government support for these industries where markets are very volatile is quite important.
All right, before we wrap up, Andrew, what's next for the company?
We're straight into the feasibility program for Springdale. So we're looking to go and do some more infill drilling. I've spoken a couple of times on this call regarding the mine life that we could publish at 15 years versus what we know we've got. Now we need to go and expand that indicated resource so that we can support 20 to 30 years of mining operations, but also expansions of the mine as well, to increase the capacity of the plant and increase the production at Springdale. So we want to do that infill drilling. We will do more exploration to expand our Mason Bay deposit find that we discovered last year, which we think is going to be another replica of what Springdale Main is going to be. And we'll get on with all of the technical work that we need to support the permitting process and the definitive feasibility study. So yeah, there's no rest for the team here. We're straight back into the development phase.
All right, for all the investors watching right now and listening right now, what's the one key takeaway message you'd like to impress on them?
I think value is the key message for us. We are well and truly on a track to being rated amongst our peers in terms of the overall development of our project, the quality of our project, and I think we're trading at quite a considerable discount to what our peers are. And so I think that's a great opportunity for investors to sort of study where we're at, study the quality of our assets and the work that we've done, assess where our peers are at, and try and help us close the gap those peers.
All right. Well, Andrew, a pretty comprehensive and forensic insight into what IG6 is all about at the moment and into the future. So we do appreciate your time and thanks for joining us on Small Caps today. And we look forward to, I guess, sharing future updates on all the good news around international graphite.
Pleasure, Peter. Great to talk.